There is a specific kind of silence that exists in a room full of people who think they own you. It isn't a quiet silence. It's loud. It hums with expectation. It vibrates with the assumption that you will do exactly what you are told, simply because you always have. I lived in that silence for 34 years. My name is Elias. If you Googled me, you wouldn't find much. You would find my last name, Vance, attached to the Vance Architectural Group. You would find endless articles about my mother, Eleanor, the visionary matriarch who saved the firm after my father passed. You would find splashy, high-definition photos of my younger brother, Julian, standing on ribbons of concrete and glass, smiling that jagged, charming smile that made investors open their checkbooks without reading the fine print. But me? I was the gray blur in the background of the gala photos. I was the name listed as CFO in the bottom corner of the annual report, in font size 10. I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on, the taxes were paid, and the intricate web of lies my family spun didn't collapse under its own weight. I loved them. That's the first thing you need to understand. I didn't do the work because I was weak. I did it because I believed in the myth of us. The Vance family against the world. My routine was a ritual of devotion. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. every single morning. Not because I wanted to beat the traffic, but because I needed 2 hours of uninterrupted time to fix what Julian had broken the night before. I lived in a modern, sterile apartment downtown, paid for by the company, but I spent my life in the glass tower my father built. I remember a specific Tuesday in November. The air in the city was biting, the kind of cold that snaps against your skin, but inside the office, the climate control was set to a perfect, humless 70 degrees. I sat at my desk, a sprawling slab of mahogany that had belonged to my father. On the surface, 3 monitors glowed with spreadsheets. Column A, Project Horizon. Column B, the actual costs. Column C, the deficit. Project Horizon was Julian's baby. A massive, mixed-use development that was supposed to revitalize the waterfront. It was also 6 months behind schedule and $4 million over budget. I took a sip of black coffee. It was lukewarm. I didn't mind. At 7:15 a.m., the elevator chimed. It was early for anyone else, but not for Eleanor. My mother didn't walk, she glided. She was 62 but looked 45, thanks to a strict regimen of kale, Pilates, and the best surgeons in Switzerland. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car. Elias, she said, not looking up from her phone as she breezed past my glass walls. The board meeting is at 10. Tell me you fixed the projections. I stood up, smoothing the front of my shirt. Good morning to you too, Mother. She stopped, turning slowly. Her eyes were blue ice. Don't be petulant, darling. It doesn't suit your complexion. Did you fix it? I moved the liquidity from the Unseen Assets Trust, I said, my voice steady. It plugs the hole in Julian's budget for now. But we're leveraging the future to pay for the present. If the zoning permits don't clear by January, we are exposed. She smiled then. It was the smile she used on donors. Warm, but with zero temperature behind it. She walked over and brushed a piece of invisible lint off my shoulder. That's why I have you, Elias, she whispered. Julian dreams the dream. You build the foundation. That's the arrangement. We all play our parts. We all play our parts. That phrase was the catechism of my childhood. Julian was the star. I was the gravity that kept him from floating away. I watched her walk into her corner office. I sat back down. I felt a small knot of pride in my chest. I had saved us again. I was useful. I was essential. But as I looked back at the spreadsheet, specifically at the transfer I had just authorized, a small cursor blinked at me. The funds had moved, but the confirmation number looked odd. Usually, our bank generated a 12-digit alphanumeric code. This one was 14 digits. I frowned. I tapped my pen against the desk. Probably a system update at the bank. I made a mental note to call our rep, David, later that afternoon. Just to be sure. I deleted the note. It was petty. Why was I checking up on the bank? I was tired. That was it. By 10 a.m., the boardroom was full. The room smelled of expensive cologne and fear. The board members were old money, men and women who didn't understand construction but understood dividends. Julian burst in 5 minutes late. He looked like he had just stepped off a yacht, tanned, hair perfectly messy, wearing a suit with no tie. "Apologies, everyone," he boomed, his voice filling the acoustic dead space of the room. "Had a breakfast meeting with the city council. Good news is on the horizon." He winked at me. I didn't wink back. There was no meeting with the city council. I checked his calendar. He had a spin class at 8 o'clock and a massage at 9 o'clock. But the board ate it up. They smiled. They leaned forward. "Julian," said Mr. Henderson, the chairman. "We're worried about the overages on the waterfront project." Julian waved a hand dismissively, sitting down and spinning the chair. "Growing pains, Arthur. Just growing pains. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few million eggs, right? But seriously, I've seen the numbers. We are leaner than we look." He turned to me. "Elias has the reports." All eyes turned to me. This was the routine. Julian promised the moon. I showed them the math that proved we could afford the rocket fuel. I stood up. I passed out the packets. I walked them through the creative accounting I had spent all morning perfecting. I showed them how the losses were actually strategic tax positioning. I used big words. I spoke softly. I made them feel smart for losing money. When I finished, there was a pause. "Excellent work, Elias," Henderson grunted. "Boring, but excellent." The room chuckled. Julian laughed the loudest. He reached over and slapped my back, hard. "He's the brain, I'm the beauty." Julian joked. I smiled. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It was a joke he had made 1,000 times. It used to feel affectionate. Today, for some reason, it felt like he was talking about a dog. After the meeting, we went to lunch. It was a tradition. The Vance Victory Lap. Just the three of us, Eleanor, Julian, and me, at the French bistro around the corner. They ordered champagne. I ordered sparkling water. "To the zoning permits." Julian toasted, raising his glass. "To the zoning permits," Eleanor echoed. They clinked glasses. I raised my water. "We don't actually have the permits yet," I reminded them gently. "The hearing is in 3 weeks. And the environmental impact study is still ambiguous." Julian rolled his eyes, taking a massive gulp of vintage Dom Perignon. "God, you're such a downer, Eli. Can't you just enjoy the win?" I charmed Henderson. "He's eating out of my hand." "Henderson isn't the problem," I said. "The EPA is the problem. If they find the soil contamination from the old factory on the site, we are looking at a $10 million cleanup. We don't have 10 million, Julian. Not unless we liquidate the trust." The table went quiet. Eleanor set her glass down. The stem made a sharp click against the marble table. "Elias," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Why do you insist on ruining lunch?" "I'm not trying to ruin it, Mother. I'm trying to protect us." "We are protected," she snapped. "Because I am the CEO. And I say we are protected. You worry too much. It's becoming obsessive." She looked at Julian. They exchanged a look. It was a micro-expression. A flicker. Lasting maybe half a second. Julian's eyes narrowed slightly, and Eleanor's lips pursed. It was the look parents exchange when a child says something stupid but cute. Or maybe it was something else. "We're just worried about you, bro," Julian said, his voice shifting into that sincere, empathetic tone he used on ex-girlfriends. "You look like hell. When was the last time you took a date out? Or just, slept?" "I work," I said. "Someone has to." "Maybe you're working too hard," Eleanor said softly. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was cool. Her rings felt heavy against my knuckles. "Maybe you're starting to see cracks where there aren't any." I looked at her hand. It looked like a mother's hand. It felt comforting. "I just want the books to balance," I whispered. "They do balance," she said firmly. "Because you made them balance. Now, drink your water. We have an empire to run." I nodded. I drank my water. But as I swallowed, I couldn't shake the feeling of that 14-digit confirmation number. It was a splinter in my mind. And then, my phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from my personal email. A notification from the county clerk's office. Subject: Notice of lien filing, 4402, Oak Street. I froze. 4402, Oak Street was my apartment. The apartment the company paid for. Why would there be a lien on a property owned by the Vance Group? I swiped the notification away before Julian could see it. It was probably a mistake. A clerical error. The county clerk was notoriously incompetent. "Everything okay?" Julian asked, chewing on a piece of lobster. "Fine," I said. "Just spam." I looked at my family. My mother, elegant and steel-spined. My brother, golden and fearless. They were eating, laughing, planning the future. They looked so peaceful. I didn't know it then, but that was the last meal we would ever have as a family. I didn't know that the silence I had lived in for 34 years wasn't peace. It was the sound of a trap waiting to snap shut. And I was the only one standing on the trigger. The human brain is an incredible machine for generating denial. It will construct elaborate architectures of logic to protect you from a truth that hurts too much to accept. I spent the next week living inside one of those architectures. I returned to the office that afternoon with a singular focus: prove the lien notification was a mistake. I didn't log into the main server. I went through the physical files in the archives. I told myself I was being thorough. In reality, I was looking for comfort. I wanted to find a piece of paper that said, "paid in full," so I could go back to being the dutiful son. I found the property deed for my apartment. It was listed under Vance Holdings LLC, a subsidiary I managed. Everything looked correct. But when I cross-referenced the tax payments, I found a gap. 3 months of property taxes hadn't been paid. That was impossible. I signed the checks myself. Every Friday, I sat with a stack of checks and a fountain pen, reviewing every invoice. I remembered signing the tax check for the apartment. I remembered the specific shade of blue ink. I pulled up the digital banking records. There it was. Check number 4092. Pay to the order of City Treasurer. Amount, $4,200. Status, cancelled. My heart skipped a beat. Cancelled. I clicked on the transaction details. Cancelled by user, E_Vance_admin. Me. But I hadn't cancelled it. I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 3 a.m. on a Saturday 3 weeks ago. I was asleep then. I was alone in my apartment, asleep. Tech glitch, I muttered to the empty room. Someone hacked my login. It was the only logical explanation. We dealt with millions of dollars. Security breaches happened. I immediately changed my password. I flagged the transaction. Then I reissued the payment from my personal account, just to clear the lien. I didn't want to worry Mother with a technical error. She hated details. But the splinter in my mind dug deeper. 2 days later, on Thursday, I was in Julian's office dropping off the revised blueprints for the waterfront. Julian wasn't there. He was out, scouting locations, which usually meant day drinking at the country club. His office was a shrine to his ego. Awards on the shelves, framed magazine covers. His desk was a chaotic mess of sketches and unread mail. I placed the blueprints on the center of his desk. As I turned to leave, a sticky note on his monitor caught my eye. It was in his handwriting. Scrawled, messy. Project S, transfer complete. Don't tell E yet. I stopped. Don't tell E yet. Elias. I stood there, the hum of the HVAC suddenly deafening. What was Project S? We didn't have a Project S. We had Horizon, Zenith, and Apex. We used grandiose names for our developments. I reached out and peeled the sticky note off the monitor. My hand was shaking slightly. Maybe S stood for surprise? Was it my birthday coming up? No, that was months away. Maybe it was a surprise gift for Mom. I stuck the note back on the monitor, slightly askew. You're paranoid, I told myself. He's planning a surprise party. Or a new strategy he wants to pitch when it's ready. You know how he is. He likes the dramatic reveal. I walked out of his office. But I didn't go back to my desk. I went to the IT server room in the basement. I wasn't an IT expert, but I had admin privileges. I needed them for audits. I sat in the cold, dark room, surrounded by the blinking lights of the server racks. I pulled up the system logs. I searched for Project S. Nothing. I searched for files created by Julian in the last month. Hundreds of JPGs, some emails to contractors, a few PDF contracts. Then I saw it. A folder created 4 days ago. Folder name, shell_04. I opened it. Inside was a single PDF. Purchase agreement, 120-foot Sunseeker yacht. Name, the Silencer. I felt a wave of nausea. A yacht. We were bleeding cash on the waterfront project, and Julian was buying a yacht. I scrolled to the signature page. There was Julian's signature. Bold and sweeping. And right next to it, on the line for guarantor, was a signature that made the room spin. It was my signature. Not a forgery. It was my signature. The loop of the E, the sharp cross of the T in the middle of Vance. It was perfect. But I had never seen this document in my life. I zoomed in. The pixels around the signature looked flat. It was a digital copy. A copy-paste job. Someone had taken a high-resolution scan of my signature from another document and pasted it onto this loan agreement. I sat back, the cold of the server room seeping into my bones. Julian had forged my signature to buy a boat. A multi-million-dollar boat. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was panic. If the bank found out, it was fraud. Julian could go to jail. He's an idiot, I thought, my mind racing to find a solution. He's a reckless idiot. I have to fix this. I didn't think about the betrayal. I thought about the damage control. That was my programming. Fix the mess. I printed the document. I folded it and put it in my inside jacket pocket. I needed to confront him. But I had to be careful. If I scared him, he might do something even stupider. I went home early that night. I couldn't focus. My apartment felt different. The walls felt thinner. I poured a drink. Scotch. Rare for me. I sat on my sofa and looked at the document again. Why did he name the boat the Silencer? It seemed like such a violent name for a pleasure craft. Then, a thought struck me. A thought so dark I tried to push it away. Don't tell you yet. Was the note about the boat? Or was the boat part of something bigger? I turned on the TV to drown out the silence. The local news was on. Breaking news regarding the Vance Architectural Group, the anchor said. My head snapped up. Reports are surfacing of a major investigation into the waterfront development, the reporter said, standing in front of our building. Sources say the EPA has flagged the site for toxic waste dumping. The Vance Group has denied all allegations. I grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. However, the reporter continued, leaked documents suggest that the chief financial officer, Elias Vance, signed off on the disposal of hazardous materials to unlicensed facilities to cut costs. The screen flashed a document. It was a waste disposal manifest. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. I dropped the glass of scotch. It shattered on the hardwood floor, amber liquid splashing everywhere. I hadn't signed that. I would never sign that. I was the one warning them about the EPA. My phone started ringing. It was Eleanor. I stared at the screen. Mother. She would know this was a lie. She knew I was the careful one. She knew I followed the rules. I picked up. Mother, did you see the news? It's a fabrication. They're using a forged. Elias, she cut me off. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was calm. Tragically calm. Where are you? I'm at home. Mother, listen to me. Someone is faking my signature. We need to call legal. We need to issue a statement denying. Elias, stop, she said. The silence on the line was heavy. The police are on their way to your apartment. What? Why? To take my statement. To arrest you, Elias. My blood ran cold. Arrest me? For what? For the dumping, she said. Her voice cracked, just a little. A perfect performance. And for the embezzlement. Embezzlement? I whispered. We found the account, Elias. The offshore account where you've been funneling the project money. The money you used to buy that yacht. The room spun. The yacht. The silencer. Julian bought the yacht, I said, my voice rising. I have the proof. I found the file. Julian. She sounded heartbroken. Oh, Elias. Don't do that. Don't blame your brother. We know you've been under a lot of pressure. We know you felt unappreciated. I didn't do this. I shouted. Mother, you know I didn't do this. The signatures are yours, Elias. The bank transfers came from your login. The audit, it's all there. You did this, I realized. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. You and Julian. You set me up. We're going to get you the best lawyers, she said, ignoring my accusation. We'll plead mental incompetence due to stress. You'll go to a nice facility for a few years. The firm will survive. We'll say you were a rogue actor. It saves the company, Elias. It saves the legacy. I am the legacy. I screamed. No, darling, she said, her voice turning to steel again. You're the help. Julian is the legacy. And we can't let Julian go to prison. He wouldn't survive it. You're strong. You can handle it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Getting closer. Don't say anything to the police, she commanded. Just wait for our lawyer. Do it for the family, Elias. One last time. The line went dead. I stood there, the phone shaking in my hand. The sirens were loud now. Blue and red lights flashed against my living room window. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. You're the help. I didn't run. I didn't flush anything. I sat down on the couch. I realized something then. They had planned this perfectly. They had used my trust, my routine, my silence against me. They needed a villain to save their hero. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed I was just the accountant. They assumed I only looked at the numbers they gave me. They forgot that I was the one who built the system. And as the pounding started on my front door, police. Open up. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt a strange, cold clarity. I stood up and walked to the door. Do it for the family, she had said. Okay, mother, I whispered to the wood. I will. I opened the door. The flash of the cameras outside blinded me. They had tipped off the press too. Of course they had. The public arrest of the corrupt brother would be the morning headline. I put my hands up. I let them cuff me. I didn't say a word. The silence was back. But this time, it wasn't the silence of submission. It was the silence of a man holding a grenade, waiting for everyone to get close enough before he pulled the pin. The holding cell smelled of bleach and old sweat. It was a sensory assault after the hermetically sealed world of the Vance offices. I spent 48 hours there before bail was posted. Not by my family. By a bail bondsman I had to call myself, using the one phone call to contact a private asset manager I knew, a man named Silas who owed me a favor from a tax loophole I'd found for him 3 years ago. My family's lawyer never showed up. When I walked out of the precinct, the press was gone. The news cycle had moved on, or perhaps Eleanor had pulled strings to keep my release quiet. She wanted the arrest public, but she would want my defense invisible. I hailed a taxi. My accounts were frozen. My credit cards were declined. I paid the driver with the cash I had in my wallet, $200. I didn't go to my apartment. It would be swarming with reporters or investigators. I went to a Motel 6 on the edge of the industrial district. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now living in the shadow of the very skyline I had helped finance. I sat on the lumpy mattress and turned on the small TV. There was Julian. He was holding a press conference. He looked devastated. He was wearing a black suit, a somber tie. He looked like a grieving widow. We are shocked, Julian was saying, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. Betrayed. My brother. Elias was always the quiet one. We thought he was working hard. We didn't know he was struggling with these demons. We didn't know he was stealing from the very people we try to help. Eleanor stood behind him, looking stoic and brave. We are cooperating fully with the authorities, Julian continued. The Vance Group is a victim here. But we will rebuild. We will make right what my brother destroyed. I turned off the TV. I didn't throw the remote. I didn't scream. I sat in the dark and I thought about the demons. The narrative was being crafted in real time. Elias the embezzler. Elias the toxic dumper. Elias the jealous brother who tried to sabotage the golden child. It was a good story. It was simple. The public would eat it up. But as I sat there, the shock began to fade, replaced by the mechanical whirring of my mind. They had used digital signatures. They had used my login. But they were sloppy. Julian was lazy. He always had been. He wanted the result without the work. I remembered the Project S folder. The date of creation. I remembered something else. The Vance Group's server backups were automated. Every night at midnight, the entire system mirrored itself to a cloud server in the Caymans. It was a redundancy I had installed 5 years ago after a ransomware scare. Only I knew the encryption key. Eleanor and Julian thought that by locking me out of the building and freezing my accounts, they had cut off my access. They forgot that I didn't need a building to access the cloud. But I couldn't just log in. If I logged in now, the IT team, probably hired mercenaries by now, would see the ping. They would trace the IP to this motel. They would know I was digging. I needed to be a ghost. I spent the next 3 days in that motel room. I ate vending machine crackers. I drank tap water. I needed a computer. I couldn't use a smartphone. I waited until nightfall on the 3rd day. I walked 2 miles to an internet cafe, a relic of the past that still existed in this rundown neighborhood. I paid cash. I wore a hoodie. I sat in the back corner. I didn't go to the Cayman server immediately. First, I checked the public court filings against me. The evidence list was extensive. Bank statements, emails, witness testimony from a foreman claiming I ordered the dumping verbally. The foreman was a man named Gregson. I knew him. He was a gambler. Julian had probably paid off his debts. I looked at the bank statements. The embezzled money, $5 million, had been moved to an account in the Isle of Man. The prosecution claimed that account was mine. I traced the routing number. It wasn't a standard personal account. It was a shell company trust. Vance Global Holdings. I dug deeper. Who were the beneficiaries of Vance Global Holdings? The documents were sealed. But every shell company has an incorporation agent. I found the agent's name, Matheson and Associates in Panama. I knew Matheson. My father had used him for legitimate business in the 90s. I logged into my father's old, dormant email account. I had never deactivated it. I used it as a dead drop for sensitive storage. I searched the archives. There was an email chain from 6 months ago. From julian.vance@vancegroup.com to matheson@securepanama.net. Subject, structure change. I opened it. Matheson, we need to set up a new vehicle. Put it in Elias's name. Use the digital signature on file. Make sure the beneficiary reverts to the bearer upon the death or incarceration of the primary holder. Upon incarceration. They had planned this 6 months ago. They hadn't just reacted to the EPA investigation. They had created the EPA violation as the trigger. They intentionally dumped the waste to trigger the investigation, knowing they had the scapegoat ready. Why? Why burn the company's reputation just to get rid of me? I kept reading. And then I found it. The smoking gun. It wasn't about the $5 million. That was pocket change to them. It was about the insurance. Key man insurance. The Vance Group held a policy on the executive team. If the CFO, me, was found to be criminally liable for damages, the company could claim employee dishonesty coverage. The payout? $50 million. And, if the reputation of the firm was damaged by a rogue executive, they could claim reputational harm damages from their umbrella policy. Another $50 million. They were cashing me in. They were broke. The waterfront project had drained them dry. They were insolvent. So they decided to liquidate their most valuable asset, me. I was worth $100 million to them if I was a criminal. I was worth nothing to them as a brother. I stared at the screen in the dingy internet cafe. The teenager at the counter was playing a video game. The hum of the refrigerator was loud. I felt tears prick my eyes. Not out of sadness. But out of sheer, overwhelming awe at the cruelty of it. My mother. The woman who brushed lint off my shoulder. She had authorized a plan to frame her son for federal crimes to collect an insurance payout. She had sold me. I took a deep breath. I downloaded the email chain. I downloaded the metadata proving Julian had sent it. I downloaded the server logs showing the copy-paste of my signature. I saved everything to an encrypted drive. Then, I did something they didn't expect. I didn't send it to the police. I didn't send it to the press. I didn't send it to their lawyer. If I released this now, it would be a messy legal battle. They would claim the emails were faked. They would outspend me. They would drag it out for years while I sat in prison. No. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had one. I needed them to spend the money. If they collected the insurance money, that was insurance fraud. That was a federal felony with a mandatory minimum sentence. If they spent the money, they couldn't pay it back. I needed to wait. I closed the browser. I wiped the history. I walked out of the cafe and back into the night. The partial betrayal was over. I knew the truth now. I wasn't a son. I was a product. And my expiration date had arrived. But they forgot one thing about products. Sometimes, they explode. The art of losing is difficult to master. It requires you to suppress every survival instinct you possess. When an animal is cornered, it bites. When a man is cornered, he lies. But I had to do something unnatural. I had to let the corner crush me. I had to become the villain they wrote me to be. 3 days after the discovery in the internet cafe, I met with the court-appointed defense attorney. His name was Miller. He was overworked, underpaid, and smelled faintly of stale tobacco and defeat. He looked at my case file the way a mechanic looks at a totaled car, not with sympathy, but with an estimation of scrap value. "The evidence is overwhelming, Mr. Vance," Miller said, shuffling the papers on the metal table of the visitation room. "They have signatures. They have the IP addresses. They have the foreman's testimony. If we go to trial, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. Federal prison. No parole." I looked at his frayed tie. "What are my options?" "A plea deal," he said, not making eye contact. "The prosecutor is ambitious. He wants a headline, not a long trial. If you plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of environmental negligence, we can knock it down to 5 years. Maybe out in 3 with good behavior. 3 years of my life. That was the price of admission for my revenge." "Do it," I said softly. Miller blinked, surprised. Usually, men like me, men in suits, men with Vance as a last name, fought. We dragged things out. We hired experts. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You don't want to fight the signatures? You mentioned forgery during the arrest." I was confused, I said, keeping my voice flat, defeated. I was, under a lot of pressure. I did it. I just want it to be over. Miller sighed, relieved he wouldn't have to work late. "All right. I'll draft the plea." The next week was a blur of procedural humiliation. I stood before a judge. I said the word, "guilty." I saw the reporters scribbling furiously in the back row. I didn't look at the gallery, but I knew they were there. Eleanor and Julian. They had to be there. The grieving family. Supporting the troubled son even as justice was served. When the gavel banged, it sounded like a starter pistol. Because the moment I said, "guilty," on the official record, the clock started ticking on the insurance payout. I was granted a deferment of sentencing for 6 months to get my affairs in order and assist with the asset recovery. This was rare, but my family had pulled strings. They didn't want me in a cell yet. They wanted me out and neutered, a visible reminder of their mercy. I moved into a small studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were background noise. I worked a cash job stocking shelves at a grocery store at night. By day, I watched them. I had installed a keystroke logger on Julian's laptop 3 years ago. It wasn't malicious back then, it was parental. I used it to make sure he wasn't gambling away the company assets online. I had forgotten about it until now. It was still active. Every night, while I sat in my cramped apartment eating instant noodles, I opened my laptop and entered the life of the Vance family. It was a window into a world I used to manage, but now only observed. Week 1, the grief phase. I read Eleanor's emails. She was masterful. She sent messages to the board, to investors, to socialite friends. We are heartbroken about Elias. We had no idea the depths of his troubles. We are just grateful the truth is out so we can heal. Heal. That was her code word for cash in. She was also emailing the insurance adjusters daily. Subject: Claim number 99201, status inquiry. Body: as per the court ruling on Tuesday, the criminal liability has been established. Please expedite the processing of the key man provision. The firm is suffering liquidity issues due to the scandal and we need to stabilize operations. She was desperate. The walls were closing in on them, financially. If the insurance company balked, or investigated too closely, they were dead. But the insurance company saw a slam-dunk case. The CFO confessed. The judge accepted the plea. The paperwork was clean. Week 4, the payout. I was stocking cans of soup when my phone buzzed with a vibration pattern I had set for high-priority alerts. I went to the break room. I opened the secure app connected to the server backdoor. A wire transfer had hit the Vance Architectural Group's primary holding account. Amount: $100 million. Sender: Global Fidelity Insurance. It was done. The money was real. Now came the hardest part. The waiting. If I acted now, I could prove the fraud. But it would be messy. They could claim they didn't know I was innocent, that they were duped too. They could return the money and claim it was a misunderstanding. No. I needed them to cross the point of no return. I needed them to spend it. Once you spend fraudulent funds, you can't plead ignorance. You are a beneficiary of the crime. I watched the accounts like a hawk. For the first month, they were careful. They paid off the construction debts. They settled the EPA fines. That was smart. That was Eleanor. But then, the discipline fractured. It started with Julian. Of course it did. I watched his browser history. He was looking at real estate. Not for the company. For himself. A penthouse in Miami. $4 million. Then, a McLaren. $300,000. Then, the wire transfers started. He wasn't even laundering it well. He was moving money from the company account to his personal LLC as consulting fees. $2 million here. $3 million there. I sat in my dark apartment, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face, and I catalogued every cent. Date: October 12th. From Vance Group Operating. To JV Visionary LLC. Amount: $2,500,000. Memo: Strategic Advisory Retainer. Advisory Retainer, I whispered to the empty room. For what? Advising on how to crash a company? Then Eleanor joined in. She was subtler, but the numbers were larger. She transferred $15 million to a trust in Zurich. She paid off the mortgage on the Hamptons estate. She bought a collection of pre-war art at auction, a Basquiat for $6 million. I saw the invoice. Sold to Anonymous. Paid by Vance Group Capital Expenditure. She was classifying a painting for her living room as a capital expenditure for a construction firm. It was brazen. It was arrogant. It was perfect. By month 3, they had burned through $40 million of the insurance money on personal assets. They were drunk on the liquidity. They thought the storm was over. The bad apple was rotting in a studio apartment, awaiting prison. The public had moved on. The money was theirs. But my surveillance wasn't just financial. I had access to their digital correspondence. I read the emails between them. From Julian. To Eleanor. Mom, the Miami place is incredible. You have to come down. The heat is finally off. I feel like we can breathe again. He really was a dead weight, wasn't he? Always so gloomy about the budget. Look at us now. We're flush. From Eleanor to Julian. Be careful with the displays of wealth, darling. At least for a few more months. But yes, it is a relief. The silence in the office is refreshing. No more lectures on fiscal responsibility. We are visionaries, Julian. Elias never understood that. He was a calculator. We are the architects. I read that email 3 times. He was a calculator. I wasn't a brother to them. I wasn't a son. I was a utility appliance that had malfunctioned and been discarded. I felt a cold, hard knot in my chest tighten. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolve. I needed one final piece of evidence. I needed to prove intent. I had the emails about the setup. I had the financial trail of the fraud. But I needed them to admit, in their own words, that the insurance claim was the goal from the start. I decided to take a risk. I broke my silence. I sent an email to Eleanor. Not from a burner account, but from my old, official company address which I knew they monitored but hadn't deleted because they needed the archives. Subject, please. Mother, I am scared. The sentencing is in 2 months. I don't want to go to prison. I know I pleaded guilty, but I feel like I'm drowning. Can we talk? Just once. I have nothing left. I just want to hear your voice. Elias. It was pathetic. It was weak. It was exactly what she wanted to hear. She didn't reply by email. She called me. I stared at the phone. The caller ID said, unknown. I pressed record on my laptop, which was synced to the phone via Bluetooth. I answered. Hello. Elias, she said. Her voice was warm, dripping with that fake maternal honey. I got your note. You sound terrible. I rasped. I don't know if I can do this, Mother. Prison. I'm not built for it. You are strong, she soothed. You are a Vance. But why? I asked, letting my voice crack. Why did it have to be this way? The insurance, surely there was another way to save the company? Silence on the line. She was calculating. Elias, she sighed. We did what was necessary. The company was dying. You know the numbers better than anyone. We needed an injection of capital that the banks wouldn't give us. The insurance it was a lifeline. And you were the only one who could throw it to us. So it was for the money, I said. The 100 million. It was for the legacy, she corrected sharply. And don't worry. When you get out, we'll take care of you. We'll set up a trust. You'll never have to work again. Just, hold on. Be a good soldier. For Julian. For me. A good soldier, I repeated. Okay, Mother. I understand. Good boy, she said. Rest now. She hung up. I stopped the recording. We needed an injection of capital. The insurance was a lifeline. You were the only one who could throw it to us. She had just confessed to insurance fraud. She had admitted the motive. I sat back in my chair. The studio apartment was silent. I had everything. I had the initial conspiracy emails. I had the proof of the forged signatures. I had the server logs showing the remote access. I had the bank transfers showing the embezzlement after my crimes. I had the misuse of the insurance funds. And now, I had the audio confession. I looked at the calendar. My sentencing hearing was in 3 weeks. Julian was hosting a relaunch gala for the Vance Group next Friday. It was going to be the social event of the season. A celebration of the firm's resilience and new direction. It was the perfect stage. I wasn't going to just hand this to the police. I was going to hand it to the world. But first, I needed to ensure that once the dominoes started falling, they couldn't stop them. I spent the next week compiling the packet. I made 50 copies on encrypted USB drives. I prepared envelopes for the FBI, the SEC, the IRS, the State Attorney General, and every major news outlet in the city. I also prepared a special packet for the board of directors. And one for the insurance company's fraud division. I didn't sleep much that week. I didn't eat much. I ran on caffeine and the cold, clean fuel of absolute certainty. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was a calculator who had been unplugged. They were about to learn that a calculator is a dangerous thing. Because it doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care about loyalty. It only cares about the balance. And the Vance family account was about to be overdrawn. I checked Julian's social media the night before the gala. He posted a photo of his new tuxedo. Caption, looking forward to the future. Hashtag Vance Legacy hashtag Unstoppable. I liked the post. It was the first time I had interacted with his account in 6 months. He probably didn't notice. Or if he did, he probably thought it was a sad, desperate attempt by his brother to stay relevant. He was wrong. It wasn't a like. It was a target lock. The night of the gala, the city was draped in a light drizzle, blurring the lights of the skyline into streaks of gold and silver. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, a venue that cost more to rent for one night than I had earned in 5 years. I wasn't invited, of course. I was the family shame, the ghost they had exorcised. But I didn't need an invitation to enter the building. I just needed to be invisible. I wore a catering uniform I had acquired a few days prior. Black slacks, white shirt, black vest. I carried a tray of empty champagne flutes. No one looks at the help. I had learned that lesson well from my mother. You're the help, she had said. I slipped through the service entrance, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. The ballroom was a sea of excess. Crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, a 10-piece orchestra playing soft jazz. There they were. Julian, center stage, holding a microphone. He looked radiant. The stress of the last year had vanished, smoothed away by money. Eleanor stood beside him, draped in emerald silk, wearing diamonds that caught the light like cold stars. We have weathered the storm. Julian announced, his voice booming over the speakers. The crowd applauded politely. These were the city's elite. They didn't care about the scandal, they cared that the Vance checks were clearing again. Tonight is about the future, Julian continued. It's about vision. We are launching 3 new skyscrapers this year. The Vance Group is stronger than ever. I stood in the shadows near the AV booth. The audiovisual technician was a kid, maybe 22, glued to his phone. Excuse me, I whispered, leaning in. Manager needs you in the kitchen. Crisis with the ice sculpture. The kid looked up, annoyed. Seriously? Yeah, hurry. He groaned, put down his headset, and jogged away. I slipped into the booth. It was a simple setup. A laptop connected to the massive projector screen behind Julian, and the sound system. I plugged in my USB drive. On stage, Julian was wrapping up. And now, I'd like to show you a video presentation of our new flagship tower, the Summit. He gestured grandly to the screen behind him. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The crowd hushed in anticipation. I hit enter. The screen didn't show a skyscraper. It showed a PDF document. It was the Project S yacht purchase agreement. The signature field zoomed in, showing the pixelated artifacts of the copy-paste job. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Julian turned around, confused. Technical difficulties, folks. 1 second. He waved at the booth. He couldn't see me in the dark. I hit next. The screen changed. It was a bank statement. Vance Group Operating Account JV Visionary LLC $2,500,000. The murmur grew louder. People were pointing. Cut the feed. Julian yelled, his voice cracking. Cut it. But I had locked the system. I hit play. My mother's voice filled the ballroom. Clear. Crisp. Undeniable. We needed an injection of capital. The insurance was a lifeline. You were the only one who could throw it to us. The silence that followed was absolute. The orchestra stopped. The clinking of glasses stopped. On stage, Eleanor froze. She looked like a statue of ice that had suddenly cracked. Julian looked at the screen, then at the crowd. His charm evaporated. He looked like a frightened child. This is out of context," he stammered into the microphone. "This is a fabrication. Security." I stepped out of the booth. I took off the black vest. Underneath, I was wearing my own suit. My CFO suit. Gray. Tailored. Boring. I walked out onto the balcony overlooking the ballroom. "It's not a fabrication, Julian," I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried. Head snapped up. 300 people looked at me. "Elias?" Julian whispered. I looked down at them. My family. My betrayers. "I sent the full dossier to the FBI an hour ago," I said calmly. "And to the insurance fraud division. They should be here any minute." Eleanor grabbed the microphone from Julian. Her composure was shattering in real time. "Elias, what have you done?" she hissed, her voice echoing through the speakers. "You are destroying this family." "No, Mother," I said. "I'm just balancing the books." I saw the doors at the back of the room burst open. Men in windbreakers with FBI in yellow letters on the back poured in. The crowd gasped and scattered, backing away from the stage as if Julian and Eleanor were contagious. I watched as the agent stormed the stage. Julian tried to run. He actually tried to run. He made it 3 steps before an agent tackled him. The visionary architect, face pressed into the expensive carpet of the Plaza Hotel. Eleanor didn't run. She stood tall, staring up at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. An agent approached her. "Eleanor Vance, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and money laundering." She let them cuff her. But her eyes never left mine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. I watched them get dragged out of the light and into the reality they had created. The guests were filming with their phones. The flashes were blinding. This would be on the news in minutes. The Vance legacy wasn't just dead, it was a meme. I turned away from the balcony. I walked down the service stairs. I exited through the back door into the rainy alley. My phone buzzed. It was Miller, my lawyer. "Elias. What the hell is happening? The prosecutor just called me. He's moving to vacate your plea. He's seen the files you sent. He's dropping all charges against you." I stopped in the alley. The rain felt cold and clean on my face. "That's good news, Miller," I said. "Good news? It's a miracle. You're free, Elias. And, there's something else." "What?" "The whistleblower statutes. Because you provided the evidence that led to the recovery of the $100 million, and the exposure of the tax evasion, you're entitled to a percentage of the recovered funds. The IRS and the insurance company, they pay out rewards for this kind of thing." I looked up at the gray sky. "How much?" "It's usually between 10 and 30%. You're looking at maybe $15 to $20 million. Legally. I hung up the phone. $15 million. It wasn't the 100 million they stole. But it was mine. It was earned. I walked down the wet pavement. I didn't have a destination. I was free. The silence in my head was finally gone. But as I walked, I realized something. I had won. I had destroyed them. I had the money. But I was walking alone. The victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. It tasted like the truth. I was the one who built the foundation. And now, I was the one standing in the rubble. 6 months later. I sat in a small cafe in Zurich. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and coffee. I wasn't Elias Vance, the CFO, anymore. I was just a man in a coat, reading a newspaper. The legal proceedings back home were a circus. Julian had turned on Eleanor in a desperate attempt to cut a deal. He claimed she manipulated him. He cried in court. The jury didn't buy it. He got 12 years. Eleanor got 15. The Vance Architectural Group was dissolved. The assets were liquidated to pay back the insurance company and the creditors. The skyscrapers Julian dreamed of were never built. The waterfront project was sold for scraps to a competitor. The name Vance was now synonymous with greed. I sipped my espresso. I had received my whistleblower reward. $18 million after taxes. I had moved to Europe. I changed my name. I lived a quiet life. I didn't work in finance anymore. I bought a small bookstore. I spent my days organizing shelves, balancing the till, drinking tea. It was boring. It was perfect. But the silence was still there. Sometimes, late at night, I would look at the photo I kept in my wallet. It was taken 10 years ago. A Christmas party. Julian was laughing, his arm around my shoulder. Eleanor was smiling, actually smiling, looking at us with what looked like pride. It was a lie, I knew that now. It was a performance. But it was a beautiful performance. I missed them. That is the terrible truth about abuse, about toxic families. You don't just miss the people, you miss the illusion of belonging. You miss the role you played, even if that role was to be the victim. I had cut out the cancer, but I had lost a part of myself in the surgery. A woman walked into the bookstore. She was looking for a book on architecture. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice rusty. "We don't carry those here." She smiled and left. I walked to the window and watched the snow fall on the cobblestone street. I thought about Julian in his cell. Was he charming the guards? Was he planning his comeback? I thought about Eleanor. Was she organizing the prison library? Was she running the place yet? Probably. They were survivors. Parasites, but survivors. And me? I was the architect of their destruction. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked older. My eyes were harder. I had learned the price of silence. Silence is compliance. Silence is permission. But breaking the silence, that has a price too. It costs you everything you thought you knew. It strips you bare. But as I watched the snow cover the street, turning the world into a clean, blank slate, I realized something else. I was lonely. Yes. But for the first time in 34 years, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a shadow. I didn't see the help. I saw a man. And for now, that was enough. I turned the sign on the door to closed. I walked into the back room. I didn't check the locks 3 times. I checked them once. I was safe. The silence was finally just quiet.